so excited this morning. Calico has agreed to come on. Let me just kind of preface. I met Calico back in 2017 at Mystery School in Utah with David Hoffmeister's Course in Miracles community. And I'll just keep it real brief. She's been a luminary and a teacher and a mighty companion. And the love that comes from this woman is part of my emergence. So I'm done talking. Calico, it's your turn. Share with us everything. Just let go, because everyone's excited to meet you.
Hola, everybody. Yeah, Kenneth had said that everyone's kind of had some introduction to A Course in Miracles. So I'm just going to assume that is the case. My path is A Course in Miracles. It's I like to say I'm not a Christian. I don't label myself a Christian or a Buddhist or anything. I am A Course in Miracles, and my path is mind training. I mind train me on a regular basis, pretty much all the time. And A Course in Miracles is in chapter 1. It's states that this is a course in mind training, period. That's it. It's not a religion. It's not a philosophy. It's a course in mind training. Jesus who supposedly wrote A Course in Miracles. And it's funny, I'm not a Christian, but I love Jesus. and Jesus says, Jesus had a way of thinking. And, that's why at the end of his life, when they were, putting nails in his hands and hoisting him up, he really, really said it all. And forgive them, they know not what they do. It's about forgiveness, and it's about pulling back all those projections that we have. And I had a lot of them, and I had to pull back every single one of them. And it was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, quite frankly. And I continue mind training. So what I'm going to share today is really my process. And if you find something helpful in there for your process, take it. It's yours. But I'm not here to teach anybody. I'm a practitioner of A Course in Miracles, and I will continue to be a practitioner for A Course in Miracles probably till the moment I quit breathing and lay my body down and move into the mind of God totally. Okay. I have studied A Course in Miracles for probably about 30 years. Okay. And that's your traditional book study. You go in, you open the book up, you read, everyone shares, and I like to say I'd close the book and go out and be an asshole. So it's kind of like, that was my experience of A Course in Miracles. It really was 5 times, because I love setting up book study meetings. So I had about 5 of them, and I go to all of them. And that was, I didn't know how to apply it. I learned how to apply it when I was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And the doctor said, well, we can't do anything else for you, so get your life in order and enjoy whatever time you've got left. And I was just like, I make light of it now, but boy, I tell you, I've never been hit with such a conversation. It's like, and the doctor was a dear friend of mine, and he was just saying, there's nothing we can do for you. And I'm like, okay, so what does that mean? I wasn't planning on this. And I know David Hoffmeister talks about the ring of fear. Actually, many traditions talk about the ring of fear. And I actually call it the ring of terror. It's so much more than just fear. It's like, if you all just ask your question, what happens if I'm not me? Well, I can't imagine. And so that's what I was faced with. And I had to figure some way to get happy, because though I didn't know anything, I really knew nothing, but I did know I wasn't happy. And the Course tells us our function is to be happy. So I was so clear I wasn't fulfilling on my function, because I was anything but happy. I was scared. I was panicked. I didn't know what to do next. And I just knew there's something I'm missing about studying A Course in Miracles. And that's when I really came to the application. And this is where I'm in training all the time with my mind, because it's the one thing that I take with me wherever I go. I remember there's a time I thought, man, I really want a vacation, but I don't want to take my mind with me. I want to go lie on a beach and forget I have a mind. But that's not the way it works. My mind is always there and it's always on. And it's as long as my eyes are open, it is thinking something. And so those are the thoughts that I work with every moment of every day. I mean, I have to say it has become, it's not even like a path anymore. It's just who I am. I am a mind. I'm always trying to get back into the loving thought in the mind of God that I am. And that's the one that I have forgotten most of my life, because most of my life, I'll just give you real short history. Most of my life, I've hated myself. I've had so much self-loathing and in my mind, I wanted to be dark-skinned, long dark hair and thin. And that wasn't who I was, but that's who I wanted to be. So my whole life, I was comparing myself to this false idea of who I wanted myself to be. And it's like, that's just self-loathing. That's not accepting what is. Because what is, I'm a very white woman, very large white woman, and it's okay. But I had to learn how to love her. So really, how I did that was with every thought that wasn't loving. And this started, I was diagnosed with this terminal cancer, and that's when it all came up, because I didn't like cancer. I didn't like that one. And so that just added to the long list of things I didn't like about me. And so I had to pick one at a time and work with God. It's like, Holy Spirit, I know, I think I have cancer. Help me see this differently through your eyes, because God doesn't see cancer. God doesn't see fat. God doesn't see white or black. God doesn't see, because that's a perception. Ego is the only one that has perception. And God we're loving thoughts in the mind of God, period. No matter how we're showing up in this movie, we're a loving thought in the mind of God. And that's what I forgot pretty much from day one on. And I've been spending the rest of my time on this planet trying to get back to that and figure out how to do this so that I'm not beating myself up all the time. I had an anorexic mother who was anorexic before they even had a word for anorexia. And I just knew I was, I'd go to lunch and, people were sharing their Twinkies and ding dongs, and I'd have carrots and celery sticks. It was lunch was a nightmare. It's like, ooh, we want to trade that PB&J for some celery. And it's like, but that's just the way I was raised. So I had a lot of forgiveness opportunities with food. Food is irrelevant. God doesn't care what I eat. God doesn't care what you eat, but again, in my mind, I had good food and bad food, eat from the good food list, don't eat from the bad food list. If you eat from the bad list, then you're going to beat yourself up all day. It's just the insanity of my mind knew no end. I remember, oh God, this is well before the cancer, but I threw my scale out with God. I've got a website, One Joyous Mind, and in there I wrote a blog on this. I threw my scale out with Holy Spirit. And it was like, because what I was finding, I'd step on the scale, and if it went down a pound, I had a good day. If it went up a pound, I had a bad day. But even if I had a good day, I was in fear that I'd gain that pound back. It was just the insanity of it was just beyond words. So I thought, okay, we're getting rid of this little machinery called a scale, because it's just dooming me every morning. And it's like, so my whole life has been one of applying the principles that I'm perfect. And if I'm thinking something other than I'm perfect, I'm in a bad neighborhood. And that's when prayer comes in. And I must say, I pray all the time. I'll be in a conversation with someone and I can drop into prayer. It's no one knows, it's kind of like Kegel exercises. No one knows I'm doing them, but I do it all the time. It's like Holy Spirit and I are one in hand. And if something comes up in a conversation that I may have a hook with, and I call anything that generates some kind of emotion other than happy. So if I'm in a conversation with someone and something jars me, I'll immediately, just in my mind, Holy Spirit, help me see this differently. I don't want to be pulled off course. I don't want to be pulled off of perfection by a little hook that someone just mentions. And it can be anything. I mean, I live in a spiritual community with 40 beautiful people, but guess what? They're all personalities. Every single one is a personality. And quite frankly, I mean, I really, towards the last 10 years of my life before I came back into community, I lived on the mountain by myself because I didn't like anybody. I didn't like anybody. In fact, I actually feel like the cancer came out of some of the deepest resignation I've ever been in about man's inhumanity to man. I mean, I was a freedom fighter my whole life. So at some point, I gave up all that, but then all I could see was the icky stuff, and I still believed it. And so, the resignation was, oh, honey, give yourself terminal cancer. It's faster. Otherwise you'll spend another 30 years being miserable. And I get it now completely. But it took something. And I just thank God on every level. And I thank Calico for having the willingness to take every thought on and really work with Holy Spirit with it. And that's really all I do, is mind train all the time. What am I thinking? I wake up in the morning. Am I happy? Great. If not, what's going on, Calico? Why did you separate from God again? And it's like, I don't want to separate any longer. I've been doing that my whole life. And then, I'll compare myself to you. And if you look better than I do, then I beat myself up for it. And it's like the insanity of my mind was amazing. And I had to look at every single thought in that way. Am I happy? Yes, great, keep going. Am I not happy? Well, what are you thinking? Where is it? What's the thought? Ooh, they are talking too loud, or ooh, they're having way too much fun. So I'm in a spiritual community, and there was one day, there was a beautiful woman, but she was running around the area just screaming, I love Jesus. I love, very holy rollerish, and I had an issue with anything that looked kind of that unusual. And so I sat there just judging her like crazy. And all of a sudden, it's like I slapped myself awake again and thought, okay, let's look at this. Who's not happy? Me. Who's happy? She is. Well, then why am I making her wrong for being happy? And it's kind of like, that's the way my mind training has gone every moment with everyone. It's like, if I'm thinking something that's not loving or joyous, then I'm thinking something else that's a judgment. And I have to root out every single judgment, no matter what. Like I said, I live in a community. I get some of my best material being in community. And I stay here because it's a speed up. Being around 40 different personalities, oh my God, you're going to either get it or you're going to leave. That's really the truth of it. You're going to get it or you're going to leave. And I have nailed my feet to the floor here because this is kind of like my last stand to really get the mind training. And it seems to be working because people don't bother me like they used to. And it has nothing to do with them. It's me. I am basically seeing all my judgments of others and getting back to the place that I can see them through the loving eyes of God instead of the judgmental eyes of Calico. And, like I said, I was a heat-seeking missile for seeing error. I was raised in a family that had a lot of fear. They were first generation on both sides. And I mean, they were just terrified. And they were always, I remember my father telling me, get them before they get you. And it's like, wow, these are not foundational beliefs that you really want to raise your children with, but that's what I got, because I was ready for those lessons. And I had to really work with people, that they're not out to get me. They're not evil. They're not, going to hurt me. And it's like, I know this sounds so simplistic, but this has taken years, I've probably, with people anyway, I've spent probably the last decade rooting out judgments on people around me. And some of them are very subtle. And, there was, I right outside my window is the dryer for the community. And there were people that were turning the dryer on like at midnight. And I had some rather strong thoughts about it, God damn it. And it's like, and really, okay, what's the belief, Calico? What do you believe? They're not being kind. That's was when my major belief of it. They're not being kind. Well, Holy Spirit took me on a little journey in my mind saying, okay, you have a definition of kindness. Just remember this. Everyone has their own interpretation of kindness too. You're never going to agree on what's kind. So you've got to just love them. Let this thought that they're annoying you go. Well, it didn't happen all of a sudden. It had took some time. And the last time it happened, someone was out there. The first thought in my mind was, I'm going to go out and see who's doing this. I need to put a face to who's not being kind. And Holy Spirit just slapped me down on the pillow and said, you lie there. You're not moving. You are going to lie there and love them, because that's what you need to do. Because putting a face to it would have taken me twice as far away from being loving as anything. Then I'd have a face that I'd make wrong every time I saw that face. And so it's rooting out my thoughts and really being in deep prayer with Holy Spirit. That's the trick, folks. Course in Miracles, and it says it. Oh my God, the lessons. I've never done the lessons right. Jesus says, okay, every hour on the hour for 5 minutes, repeat this. I never did that, ever. I was lucky to read the lesson in the morning, and then I felt success. Go on with your day. And the reality is that's not Jesus. Jesus doesn't mince words. This is something that it really takes consistency and willingness and humility and honesty to really root into the truth of what I'm thinking. And that's why this whole topic of mental illness, we're all mentally ill. But the last thing we need is a psychiatrist, because what they do, tell me about your childhood. No. That's not Jesus's way. That's not A Course in Miracles. Don't go there. Don't root anything up. This is about in the moment of right now. What am I thinking? And if you're not in the moment of right now, you're in a very bad neighborhood, and it will take you down. And so it's kind of like when you have these, shadow thoughts, for lack of a better word, but a lot of times they feel like they're going to kill you. But when you have a shadow thought, you have to really, Holy Spirit, help me get back to happy. Show me the belief that's behind this shadow that's creating it, because I want to be in your light. And I always get answers. And I've worked with enough people, everybody will get an answer. This is it. It's just the way it is. Holy Spirit just needs an invite. And I was slow on the invites initially. It's like, no, I can do this myself. Oh God, that one nearly took me down many times. I can handle this. You know, I used to say, people would say, how are you doing? Oh, I'm fine. Fucked up, insecure, neurotic, and emotional, but you'll never know it. You know, I had a parrot once, and the parrot died suddenly. And I went into the vet and I said, gosh, she didn't even look like she was sick. And he said to me, he said, you know, that's the way birds are. They will never show you their vulnerability, because if they show you they're vulnerable, guess what? They're dinner. And so it's kind of like, I thought, wow, you know, I learned how to do that really well. I'm not going to show you I'm vulnerable, because if I do, I'm dinner. And that makes my father correct, you know, get them before they get you. And it's like, no, I'm vulnerable and I'm with Holy Spirit. I've got this secret superpower called Holy Spirit. And I sit close. I have this, I'm a visual thinker. And one of the things I see is I'm in the movie theater, you know, the Plato's cave thing, you know, we're all watching the shadows on the screen, and Holy Spirit's sitting right next to me. And every now and then something will trigger me and I'll feel Holy Spirit's hand and I'll hear the words, honey, this used to scare you. Just remember, I'm right here. And then I squeeze Holy Spirit's hand, and Holy Spirit oftentimes will say, you want some popcorn? Just so make it real. You know, it's not real except in my head. And I'm not making little of this because it's big in my head. I mean, yeah, terminal cancer, it was big and it felt very real. And I was in hospice and I graduated from hospice, and I've been out of hospice for probably about 13 years now. And it's kind of like, you know, people ask me, well, are you healed of cancer? I have no idea. You know, on some level, no, I don't think so. But it doesn't bother me. I could care less. I don't care. I'm not in any pain. I'm happier than I ever have been before. And it's all I've done is mind training. That's it. Because they gave up on me. And so, all right, good. Close that door and move on in a new direction. And, you know, teachers Byron Katie and the work was very helpful to me. Eckhart Tolle and the Power of Now was extremely useful and has been most of my life. And that's A Course in Miracles, because Holy Spirit, heaven can only be accessed in this moment. You can't plan to be in heaven next Tuesday. You can't do it. You got to do it right now. And so if there's something coming up, and I can't put it on, but there's a graph that you can Google, levels of mind. And it has concentric circles. And it starts on the outside of the circle is perception. And that's where we live pretty much 99% of the time. And we just live in perception land. And our perception is our sense of taste, smell, hearing, sight, you know, ethereal. And we live there. And that's how we take in information about our world. And it can get pretty intense, because I was one of these people that I'd go into a room and I go, oh, I feel someone's anger in here. Well, it was mine, but that's okay. That was still learning to pull back the projections, because there's nothing but projections based on my perceptions. So that's the outer ring of levels of mind. And then it goes through, and it's emotion and thought, belief. And then you get to the little tiny center, and it's really a cross section of a thought. And at the very center, it needs to be a single desire. And I never lived in a single desire. I always had multiple desires. But if you have the desire for the peace of God, period, you'll access mind training much faster. But you have to really, it wasn't God. It was maybe a couple years ago. I remember thinking, I want the peace of God. And I was having at the time some symptoms come up. And I thought, okay, I want the peace of God. And then it was almost like a whisper in the background. And I want to be healed. And it's like, whoa, 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 stop, hold the presses. You know, I could hear the rubber meeting the road on 4. And it was kind of like, no, we can't do that. We have to have the peace of God only. Because if I have the peace of God, I could care less what the illusion's doing. And in Byron's work and in the levels of mind, the big ticket item for any grievance, any complaint, whether it's having icky feelings or it's I'm sick or I really hate my partner or, you know, that woman is driving me nuts, whatever the thought, it'll come to the point and they'll all ask you, well, what would you have rather had happen? And it's usually the opposite. Well, I wish I'd never met that woman. I wish I didn't have to be around my partner. I wish I didn't have to be sick. Whatever it is, that's what you really desire. Desire, there's that word again. Immediately, you've got a split desire. Peace of God and whatever that is. So at some point, you've got to honor this process. And the question is, are you willing to give up this desire for the peace of God? So with regards to my dryer outside my window, and I just wanted them to be kind. That's how I wanted it. I wanted them to be kind. And at some point I had to ask myself, are you willing to give up the idea of kindness for the peace of God? Well, no, I don't want to give up kindness because I like kindness, but it's like, but you have to give up your idea of how it should be. Because we all have this idea of how it should look. Now, my life has never looked the way I think it should have, but that's neither here nor there. This is me giving up that idea for the peace of God, for me to really experience being a loving thought in the mind of God. Because the Course is very clear, that's what we are. So anything that's on top of that, that isn't a loving thought in the mind of God, we're making it up. And then there's some processes to unwind that mess. And it really is rigorous honesty. And I call it pulling back the projection. So in the case of the laundry, okay, kindness. And then it's in my face. Calico, where are you not kind? Well, I'm not being kind right now because I want them to fucking turn the damn machine off. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I need to give that up. Because that's not going to upset me as a loving thought in the mind of God. A dryer doesn't upset a loving thought in the mind of God. But in my mind, it was the dryer that was upsetting me. And this has worked, oh my God, symptoms. I mean, I had lots of symptoms. Breathing was one of them. I didn't breathe. The last doctor I went to was probably 13 years ago. And he said, come back in 2 months and we'll tell you where the cancer is in your lungs. And I sat with that going, that doesn't sound like a great idea. I mean, how is that going to make me happy? So I just said, okay, screw this. Back to A Course in Miracles. Jesus, help me. And I took on breathing with Holy Spirit. And it really showed up this way. I have burning pain with every breath. And I was on an oxygen tank for 24 hours a day. And then I took on walking the dogs at the dog park. I thought, okay, we're going to go do this with Holy Spirit. So I took the dogs over to the dog park, too embarrassed to wear the portable oxygen tank on my back. So I just went and took the slowest walk around the dog park and humanly possible. And with every breath, pain, Holy Spirit, help me see this differently. Breathe. Pain, Holy Spirit, help me see this differently. And it was a mantra throughout the dog park. And I did this for like 3 solid months. It didn't just pop. Oh, good, I can breathe. it took me, because my mind believed I couldn't breathe. My mind believed I had lung cancer. And so there was a lot to unwind. And I don't know how it got unwound. Tell you, it was just one day I came back from the dog park and I thought, and this was about 3 months after doing it out, I didn't pray as much at the dog park today. It was because I didn't have pain when I was breathing. But it wasn't like a noticeable thing. It was just like, oh, I'm doing good. And I'm happy. Whoa. And so it's kind of like, and that's the way the mind training works. It's usually not a big aha. I've had some big ahas, but more of them are just as I show the commitment to train my mind to see only through love and not judgment, things shift. I've been in every 12-step program known to God. But there was a joke. It was a tongue-in-cheek joke in Codependency Anonymous. Ooh, and I hated the joke. It was, if the codependent would get healthy, the alcoholic would be just fine. And I was like, oh, God. And the reality is it's true. It's like there's no one out there that needs to change their mind. There's only one mind that's thinking that there are others that need to change their mind, that needs to change her mind. And that's why it's pulling back the projection every single time. It's like I'm thinking something, and then I make you wrong out there for something. And it can be anything and everything. It's like the woman down in the session room being too happy. Oh, she was too happy. Yuck. Making me crazy. Why are you so happy? And it's kind of like, okay, you want to look at that? Would you like to see that differently? Would you like to join them in their joy? And it's like, oh, right. Yes, I do want to join them in their joy. And all she is loving Jesus. I can do this. But I can do this with everyone, no matter what. Trump. Okay, I had some issues with Trump. And I watched a documentary not too long ago on Netflix, and it was a beautiful documentary. And I watch everything with Holy Spirit. I just say that right now. I don't do anything without Holy Spirit. So I was watching this with Holy Spirit, and Holy Spirit directed me to say, do you see how much his kids love him? And I don't know how many kids he has, 5 or 6, not all from the same mother, but they all love him. Really, truly. They love him. They didn't have one single negative thing to say about it. And I'm going, there was a time, my parents only had 2 kids. And there was a time neither one of us were speaking to him. I mean, there was no love. And it's kind of like, I thought, okay, he's got something. He's got children that adore him. So maybe I should get rid of my judgment and just join them in loving their father. And so now when I see Trump, I see all these kids that just love him. And it makes me happy. I just think, wow, that's kind of cool. It's definitely more empowering than what I was thinking of Trump. And it definitely puts a smile on my face to think of all these kids that love their father. So, it's everything can get turned around and seen differently. And it's just a bad habit. I like to say we never learned how to think. We were doomed from the get-go. You come into the world, they slap you on the behind. It's a girl. Well, guess what? Now you've got a girl concept, and you got all the beliefs around girl concept. Or it's a boy, and you got all the beliefs around boy concept. And it just keeps getting more and more and more and more and more layers upon layers of beliefs about who I am and who you are. And then we're just constantly judging each other. We're judging the shit out of each other all the time. And it's kind of like, This is A Course in Miracles is all it is. It's not a religion. It's not even a theology. It's a course in mind training. Jesus just wants us to love, see through love, smell through love, listen through love, taste through love, feel through love. And it means going against all the information that's coming in on our perception, our senses, because these are all ego senses. The body is an ego projection. And so it's kind of like, just see it as we are in the eternal mind of God. That's why the body may look like it dissolves and goes away and turns back to dust. But the reality is we are a loving thought in the eternal mind of God. That's all we are. And we forgot that. The moment they said, it's a girl, oh my God, now what? You know, how many children do I have to have this time around? You know, we don't have to think like this anymore. One of my favorite movies of all time, Solaris, the last line in there is, we don't have to think like this anymore. And it's kind of like, and that's what Jesus is telling us. We don't have to think like this anymore. So all those judgmental thoughts that I just thought were just, I mean, my way of healing it was to leave and go out in the mountains and live by myself with a bunch of animals. But I'd make them wrong periodically. If there was no one else to make wrong, I'd make them wrong. And it's kind of like, you know, left to my own devices, I'm going to find something to make wrong. Being in solitude doesn't handle that. It means I have to stay conscious with every breath. What am I thinking now? What am I thinking now? What am I thinking now? And it's just loving myself every step of the way, because I'm the only one that can love. And, you know, I realized not too long ago, I was thinking, you know, this whole idea of love, no wonder I had such a hard time with it most of my life, because I haven't loved myself. Well, how can I give love when I don't love me? And it's kind of like, oh, and it wasn't easy taking on loving me. That's coming from me. You know, I mean, just, you know, I picked a concept and just kind of went with it. And the first one I dealt with is fear of fat. Fear of fat? I have to deal with the fear of fat? You know, when I was in hospice, I was thin at that time. I'm about 150 pounds heavier than I was when I was in hospice. And I remember telling my social worker, I said, you know, I would rather die thin than live fat. And it was like, oh my God, you know, what a fucking setup in my mind. And so it's like I took on this, why can't I just love myself no matter what I look like? And if I'm appearing in a fat form right now, love it. It's a perfect form. It's my form. And I don't want to be abusing myself. I was also raised Catholic, just to give you some other history. You know, so mea culpa, mea culpa, mea culpa. You know, if I couldn't change you by making you wrong, guess who I started beating up on? Me. And it was kind of like, and I saw this pattern early on. I didn't have a clue what to do with it. But then somehow, and I thought, of course, miracles like crazy. I didn't like the language. It was way too Christian. I mean, there was so much wrong. My first book, I remember starting to cross out all the hymns and put hers or she's. And then, but thankfully, I kept giving those books away because I didn't want it. And then I was a chiropractor, and then people would come in, Calico, have you read this book? I think you'll like this book. And it's like, oh, damn, here it is again. And then for years, you know, when the first books came out, there were 3 books. I used them as a doorstop. You know, that's about as far as I could get to opening them up. It's like, okay. But then when I did open it up, it was very hard. I'm a very visual thinker. I don't care for Shakespeare. I mean, the words get in my way and they get tangled in my brain. And it was a hard book for me to go through. And I know it was written for Judy Scutch because she loves Shakespeare. And so that's we got what we got. But as soon as I started applying, rather than book study, applying the principles of the Course in Miracles, it all got real simple. Because for whatever reason, I do have an ability to see what I'm thinking. And, for the most part, I have a willingness. Sometimes it takes me a while to pull back the projection. It's like, oh no, this couldn't have anything to do with me. They're being an asshole. Look, it's them. They're being an asshole. It's not me. It's not me. It's not me. And then, oh, okay. What is it that I really don't like about them? Well, they're dishonest and they're not loving and they're not spiritual and they're blah, 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 blah. And it's like, Calico, can you see these are the things that you can't accept in yourself? And so it's easier to put it out there and make it their problem. The problem is over time, and I'm up in years now, and I've had lots of people I've pushed away from my life, because they're assholes. And guess what? They keep coming back in different bodies, but they keep coming back again and again and again. And it's kind of like, to stop that looping cycle, it's me having to pull back that projection, look at it, own it. Holy Spirit, help me see this differently. And then the willingness to put it on the altar to have help with seeing it differently. And Holy Spirit has never failed me, It's not immediate sometimes, but that's just, I need to show up with my commitment. I need to show up with willingness, capital W willingness. And I show up with willingness, asking for help from Holy Spirit. All those are always answered. And that's why no one can tell you how to get out of whatever situation you're in. No one can. I'm just explaining to you a process that I learned, and it's become much clearer, is A Course in Miracles is mind training. And I needed mind training more than most. I was a smart rat. I was a doctor. And I got that to prove to myself that I was worthy. But then I just filled it with all these, useless pieces of information. And that's where I got stuck. I know something now. There was someone here in the community and she knows me. I thought it was a funny question for her to ask me. She came over and she said, Calico, I've got a medical question for you. And I just started laughing. I said, it's your mind. She didn't even get the question out. I said, it's your mind. Deal with it in your mind. And she didn't want that answer. So she went and asked someone else. I'm clear that everything needs to go through a rinsing process with Holy Spirit to see it differently. Because by myself, I'm a mess. I'm amazed that I've made it this long. And now I'm like enjoying everything, even the dryer that comes on at midnight. Now I laugh. I know I've gotten through it because when someone turns it on out there, I just start giggling. It's like, oh my God, there it is again. But it doesn't bother me. I go right back to sleep. And that's the way how I know I've healed that belief, because it's not in my face making me crazy, because judgments will only make me crazy. They're going to have no effect whatsoever on anything else, but I guarantee I will suffer and have. And I have just a commitment to no suffering anymore. And that's why I start my day out with Holy Spirit, and we just take it from there, because my days are so much better when I go out with Holy Spirit and just use guidance on a regular basis, no matter where I am. The other day I was sitting at a bus stop here in Mexico, and I can't remember what was going on. I think it was heat or fatigue or something like that. And I just sat down and said, Holy Spirit, I need to see this differently. This is not helpful right now. Seeing myself fatigued and tired is not helpful. And so I sat there and just quietly stayed in some contemplation and then got up and continued on. You know, there was a nun that spoke here in our community not too long ago. I don't know what kind of nun she was, and I can't remember her name, unfortunately. I think she was some kind of Buddhist, secular nun. And she said this line that I've taken it on as mine now. She says, I don't get two thoughts away from God. And I went, oh man, yeah, that's mine now. I live like that. I don't want to get two thoughts away from God. So that first thought is, oh, I'm tired. The second thought, ooh, I'm tired and fatigued. Sit down. Here's a bench. Sit. Holy Spirit, help me see this differently. And I'll take whatever time it takes to get my mind corrected. And it happens pretty quickly if I allow it. And then I can go on with Holy Spirit. But I've taken the two thought rule. I don't get two thoughts away from Holy Spirit because that's just moving deeper. I like to see it as I'm digging my grave deeper. You know, I just keep digging it. And I've had a lifetime of massive holes to fill in. And I'm just tired of filling in holes. So I don't dig them anymore. And I don't dig them anymore by really staying very close to my source and the truth of who I am, which is I'm a holy, loving thought in the mind of God. And just because a lot of people, I didn't understand this actually. I was raised Catholic. I should have known something. But God doesn't know anything about this place, nothing. God doesn't see us as people. God just sees us as loving thoughts, period. Now, when Jesus died, he gave us the comforter. That's in the Bible. I can't believe I'm quoting Bible now, but in there, Jesus gave us the comforter when he was crucified, and the comforter is Holy Spirit, because Holy Spirit can see this world that we're making real and knows the truth of who we are as a loving thought in the mind of God. And that's why we've got this beautiful comforter to invite wherever we go, because and I get this all the time. You know, I'll be in groups of people that are talking, and all of a sudden Holy Spirit will speak to me first and going, you know, this conversation isn't being helpful for you. You may want to leave. Okay. And I'll just leave. And it's not being rude to anyone. It's just, I really trust that Holy Spirit knows my best interest, and Holy Spirit knows me real well. Holy Spirit knows my hooks better than I know my hooks. So, but Holy Spirit needs an invitation every single time. So when I get hooked by anything, it's like, Holy Spirit, I need help. I can't do this without you. And so it really is the I know mind has slipped away into oblivion. And now I am guided by this quite virginal little mind that knows very little and is quite content with that. And so I invite all of us to take on the joyous mind of knowing nothing. So with that, I think, Kenneth, you can go ahead and stop the recording and let's just see what people have to say. Bye, all YouTube people.